Welcome to the podcast that puts a finger on the pulse of medicine and technology. On this show, you'll hear from investors, industry executives, and healthcare providers on the science and business of medicine. I'm your host, Omar Khateeb, and this is the state of MedTech. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. I'm really excited about this episode, which is the inaugural Deal Rip Live episode. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background as to what a Deal Rip is and what makes it so special. So, a little over 10 years ago when I started my career in this industry at Mazor Robotics, I was trained and mentored by some of the best in the industry that, essentially built Intuitive. Names like Chris Sells, Chris Prentice, Tim Morawski, Ken Husted, and others. And I'm sure there are other names that I forgot to mention, so I apologize, but I think you guys get the point. A lot of really talented people. Well, we were selling a robotic spine platform, right? And selling capital equipment, especially when it's $1 million robot, takes time. We're talking at minimum a 9 to 11 month sales cycle. Well, when you spend that much time and company resources, you want to make sure that the deal's right. And so what started, at least from my understanding, what came out of Intuitive Surgical, and if I had to bet, you'd possibly track this history. Maybe it started at US Surgical, but let's, for all intents and purposes, say that this started at Intuitive Surgical, which is the concept of a deal rep. So in a deal rep, every quarter, the whole sales team gets together, and of course, marketing is there too. And every rep goes up and presents all their deals in detail and gets the deals ripped apart by their peers. And the purpose of this is that behind closed doors in a safe environment, this extremely radically transparent, intense event of a deal rep got to the source of truth. It stripped down everything about a deal and really exposed its vulnerabilities. And as a rep, this is really intense because, again, you're going up presenting your work, your deal to your peers. And a lot of times it was ugly. And I've seen deals shot down because, a rep might be working a deal that, let's say, Johns Hopkins or Harvard or Brigham Young, and in reality, they didn't actually have a deal, right? And these were very intense scenarios, but it brought out the best in people. And I would say that those deal reps are a big reason why Mazor was able to have its historic exit to Medtronic for $1.6 billion. So, as I went through my career, I realized that most sales leaders are not that good. They're not at the caliber as the people that I worked with. And even more surprising to me, I realized that not everybody does deal reps. And so I met a lot of capital reps throughout my career, and I would ask them like, oh, when do you guys do your deal reps? And not only did they not know what that was, they don't go and present their deals to their peers. They actually just have a one-on-one with their manager. And so I always felt that this was just such a huge missed opportunity for reps to improve and build their deals. The late and great Chris Sells used to always tell me, always be a student of the game. And for me, part of being a student of the game is watching tape. And so I always wondered, what would it be like if you took something like Monday Night Football or ESPN's Around the Horn or election night coverage on Fox or CNN and brought that to medical sales? Well, that's where Deal Rip Live was born. And again, it's been an idea brewing in my backlog for over a year now. And I finally was able to pull off the first event. And so essentially the way this works is if you go to dealrip.com, there's a form there for any rep to submit their deal anonymously. They submit their obstacles, what they're dealing with, and if picked, they get to be placed before a panel of judges to get their deal ripped live. But of course, we de-identify the rep, we de-identify the deal, we de-identify everything, right? Except the essence of the deal, right? And so we got a bunch of submissions, a lot more than I was expecting actually, when we picked two really good deals, two very fascinating deals. And for the judges, I'm very excited for the two people that I got. One is Sean Stewart, who's the Director of Strategic Accounts and Health Systems over at Cerebell, and of course his colleague and his boss, Joseph Highland Othment, who's the Vice President of Strategic Accounts and Health Systems. Cerebell is a very interesting company. They are essentially a point-of-care EEG, so just like you've seen an EKG for the heart, and we've seen how advanced it is. You can get it on your phone, you can get it on all kinds of digital devices. Well, the EEG is still pretty much read on paper, and the problem with that it presents is that it takes multiple hours to get results. It, interpret them. There's overdiagnosis, misdiagnosis, underdiagnosis, versus Cerebell's point of care technology allows you to do it within 5 minutes. So really interesting tech. And so I have them both on to be the judges on this deal rip. Now, why do I have them on? Well, we'll start with Sean Stewart. So Sean's about my age. We started at the same time, more or less, at Mazor Robotics. And when he was at Mazor, he was one of the more talented sales reps that I've seen. He started on the clinical side and then moved into capital. Always extremely objective, very methodical in his approach, and he was a big part of the team who led Mazor to its $1.6 billion acquisition. And of course, he sold robotic systems at a variety of different places. So Intuitive Surgical, Mazor Robotics, Neosis, which is dental. And then Joseph, Joseph has been in the game a little bit longer than both Sean and I, so he's been at a variety of different companies and, picked up a lot of amazing awards. He's 3-time President's Club winner at Intuitive, 2-time President's Club winner at Ethicon. He was MVP at Intuitive in 2008, 2011, 2013, Ethicon MVP in 2021. And in my opinion, the most notable of awards was that he was the #1 area sales manager in 2007 at Intuitive, which is really saying something because during those years, you had some of the most talented people, talented salespeople, all working at Intuitive. So extremely competitive, and he was #1. So with that being said, let's go right into this episode. And if you're interested in being part of the next Deal Rip, you can submit at dealrip.com. And I want to mention that this does not need to be a capital deal. This is mainly focused on capital deals, but I want to be able to make this Deal Rip concept available to everybody. So depending on who submits, and if I think the deal is interesting, it's going to dictate what judges I bring on. So future guests that I want to have on the show, Ken Husted, Chris Prentice, there's other big names that I want to have. And if there's a deal that I see that perhaps it's something that I'm not too, privy to, something, let's say in the diagnostic space or maybe implants or something, I will crowdsource from everybody on LinkedIn and figure out like who is one of the top, execs and producers in that specific area to have them as a judge. So I really want to make this a great live show. And so I'm always looking for feedback. Send me your ideas. And more importantly, go to dealrip.com, submit your deal anonymously. I'm the only person who sees it, and I will protect that confidentiality. Now, if you're listening to this episode on Apple, you're not going to be able to see the slides. You don't have to see the slides, but if you're more of a visual learner and you want to watch this, go to youtube.com and look up The State of MedTech, or just go watch this on Spotify. And lastly, very last thing, people, and thanks for your patience here. If you like this show, hey, do me a favor. #1, subscribe to the show. #2, write a review. Write a review and give it 5 stars. That literally takes you 1 minute, and always pay it forward. This is step #3. Think of somebody who who's a salesperson, maybe a leader or an exec out in the field. Share this with them. Share this with the team. Let's try and really improve and raise the level of execution and standards in this industry. So now I'm done. With that being said, let's get right into the show. Here it is, the inaugural Deal Rip Live. Enjoy. Let me bring on my panelists, the one and only Sean Stewart. Sean, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Omar. How are you?
I'm doing well. And, in true capital sales fashion, I can tell that you're calling in from a hotel room. Where in the country are you?
I'm in Kansas City, Missouri.
Fantastic. And then I'll bring Joseph. Joseph, welcome. How are you doing?
Doing great, Omar. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for carving out time. And I was very excited to have you both on because essentially both of you work together. And so there's going to be a lot of really interesting interplay here. Both of you have the same sort of culture and training when it comes to deal rips. So excited. But maybe both of you guys can share a little bit of background on how deal rips have helped you and why you think it's an important practice.
Yeah, I'll start. I think for me personally, when I started doing these, they're a little intimidating, right? Get up in front of I think the hardest person to present to are your peers. So going through those motions, but really understanding with what I was working on, was it reality or was it what I thought might go? right? And to hear the feedback from people in the room that have been doing it a lot longer than I have really allowed me to assess what I was working on and to really challenge myself. Was it a deal or not? And if it wasn't, can I make it a deal? Or was it at the point where I needed to walk away? And those are some hard lessons as a young professional trying to make it in a very tough world. So these opportunities for me were stressful, but very rewarding, and kind of allowed me to help share my experience with others as I've kind of gotten older and a little more tenured in the med device world.
Absolutely. And, Sean, I've been in many deal rips that you were in. And the one thing I remembered, and, we're talking about 10 years ago. So you and I are both young guys, but I always remembered how brutally honest and candid you were with yourself about the reality of a deal. And I think that's the one thing that's painful to watch is salespeople who are under an illusion of a deal when there's really no deal there. So you've always done a great job of that, and it shows based on your career. And Joseph, tell us, you started off Intuitive in the early days of the 2000s, where it was really the dog years, and really, was part of the pioneer team of this concept. How did it help you?
It was intimidating, to say the very least. I mean, Sean covered the majority of the high points there, but certainly, the way that I looked at this was it was a scenario very much like, working out or exercising, where you would go in there and your peers would essentially break you down and then rebuild you so that you were stronger coming out of it. We had people who passed out. We had people who would get flustered and would come into these things, trying to sort of protect the deal itself or protect the way that they were seen in front of their peers. And more often than not, those would be the people who would get hit the hardest in these deal rips. It's really an environment where you show that you're vulnerable, and you come and you sort of open the kimono, if you will, and show everybody that, there's a lot of gaps to the business. You're there to try to learn and get better. And for me, I was probably one of the people who they attacked the most because I had a lot of holes in my business, but I always came out of this better than I went into it. And it was a way for me to consolidate deals and stand on top of the podium every now and again with the feedback that people that were a lot smarter than me were giving me.
Fantastic. I appreciate you guys sharing that, and more importantly, carving out time at the end of the day just to help others. And I think that that's the way we're going to make this industry better and elevate everybody's game, is by sharing these philosophies, really, which really teach you how to act and think as a sales executive. So with that being said, let's jump right into it. And just for context for everybody, what we're going to do is, what I'm going to do is do my best to read as quickly as possible and provide context for the deal. We're going to jump into a discussion and rip the deal apart. And then we're going to do what's called a gladiator vote. Just like you see in Gladiator, we're going to do a thumbs up or thumbs down based on, is there a deal? Is it going to move forward? And can we see a path to close? So that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into it. All right. Gentlemen, you give me a heads up and let me know if you can see my screen.
Good to go.
Yep.
Perfect. Now, something to keep in mind for everybody, this is based on a criteria that Joseph had shared. So these deals, when we picked two deals that we're going to evaluate tonight, and the reps had to present and send us information on 6 criteria. Money, do you know if the item is budgeted or not? The method, what is the approval process? The motivation, what is motivating the purchase? There's a grammatical error there. Sorry, guys, I'm dyslexic. You can't make fun of me because that's pretty much a hate crime. So, sorry. Market development. What is supporting the project clinically and in the C-suite? How has it been validated? Internal support. What have you done to educate and develop the market? And last thing is impending events. And of course, we wrap up with what are the 3 things the rep thinks is needed to move a deal forward. So that being said, let's jump forward. Deal number 1. This is a women's health mega deal. Okay. And so a mega health system who has a competitor friendly chair that just retired. The interim chair is in place, and there's a chance to seal the business and convert to expand within the account. So let me read through this quickly for those who are listening to the podcast. We have a large healthcare enterprise with 16 hospitals, from large to critical access, 4 outpatient patient imaging centers, and dozens of clinics. Many KOLs are retiring. There's a strong supporter of this company in most imaging modalities, with the exceptions being in mammography. They always review current competitive technology from all vendors to ensure that they get the best technology at the best possible price. They have a strong centralized purchasing group that is very influential in all capital budgeting and purchasing processes. Our key account executive at this account has been in place for almost 10 years and is very well liked by customers. Great news, right? Except the key account executive doesn't have any contacts within the women's health space. The chair of the women's health section for 15 years had a close relationship with a competitor and was actually a consultant for them. They just retired 3 years ago, and now they have an interim chair with no vested interest in any vendor, right? In the process of hiring of a new chair, but nobody's been announced yet, and they have a fleet of roughly 34 competitor mammography units. All the units have 3D capabilities, with the exception of a few being older ones. Over half the mammo fleet is first generation technology, 7 years old. So budgeting discussions will begin shortly after the new chair is named. The remainder of the fleet will be replaced over the subsequent 5 to 7 years. Additionally, there will be several net new mammo units as they grow. I'm going to need a lot more water because I'm going to have to talk faster, but we'll make this work. All right, money. Do you know if the item's budget or not? So rep said, not on the current budget, but once a new chair is hired in a couple of months, budgeting discussions will begin. On the method, they don't know the method of the process currently. They're still figuring that out. On the motivation, not on current budget, but again, once the chair is hired in a couple of months, budgeting discussions will begin. So they don't know if there's any motivation to purchase. On the side of market development, how are you going to support this project? Well, the key account executive has close relationships with the C-suite at the enterprise and hospital levels, as well as clinical KOLs in various spaces or services, but no relationships in the specific space, which is women's health, which is where they're trying to sell. Finally, internal support. Haven't been able to educate and develop the market. And impending events. The rep says, I think it's less about getting them to buy now in this scenario and more about making sure we leverage and educate the right people and form the right relationships. So when the new chair comes in, we are in a favorable position. Now, before we jump into discussion, the last thing we asked the rep, which is the next 3 steps needed to close the deal. Here are the rep's answers. Step 1, get to know the people and the account to figure out what they like, why they like it, and who are the decision makers, what do they care about, any info on who the new chair might possibly be. Step number 2, use the key account executive to leverage their relationships to get us into the right places and people. And number 3, educate the staff, the KOLs about the product, get them warmed up to it so that when the new chair does come in, you have the right people on the inside pushing for you. So before we make our decisions and everything, let me stop sharing the screen. So gentlemen, Sean, why don't we go and start with you? What are your thoughts on this deal?
You know, it's interesting. It has a lot of moving parts. With that many hospitals, there's probably going to be a lot of people involved in a process like that. When we kind of pull it back a bit and look about, where are you now? Do you have clinical support, right? What does that look like? And then understanding kind of the dynamics of the hospital system itself, right? I think one of the biggest challenges we all see right now is we're all kind of coming out of this pandemic, and some hospitals as a whole have strong balance sheets and some of them have more challenging ones. So understanding about priorities and where does this kind of capital piece fall under those priorities. And so I kind of noticed as we kind of started looking at it, the rep was getting very transactional in the approach.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really starting from the beginning and understanding where the support is and trying to go out and build relationships with those supporters. Because at a system this size, there's probably going to be a lot of clinicians at different hospitals that have different views about why they want the tech. And so understanding from the beginning about who are my targets, and instead of looking at the entire health system, can you pick 1 or 2 hospitals to start and kind of peel that back a bit and start to think about, all right, from a starting point, who are the main 5 or 6 people I'm going to start with, and use that as your benchmark to get started.
And real quick before we jump over to Joseph, Sean, why in your opinion is it important to pick 1 or 2 hospitals to start?
It's very hard to manage like that many hospitals at one time as a rep, because your greatest resource as a rep is time, right? So where are you going to have the most value of your time? And so trying to start off with, maybe there's a history of physicians that currently use the product that they can cross-reference and kind of go after. So there's ways to kind of pick and choose where you're going to start, but it's always nice to hear from another peer about why they use a product or what does that look like. So it's very tough to look at that many hospitals at once and say, this is where I'm going to go after. I'm going to go after all of them. Can you pick 1 or 2 to start, build a support, and then use those guys to continue your support at your other hospitals? Because if they're out there talking about it, it's going to make your life a lot easier.
Right, it makes a lot of sense. I definitely agree. I think there's a lot of importance just on being able to niche down and focus. Joseph, what were your thoughts on the deal that the rep presented?
Yeah. So first of all, I would say kudos to the rep for really being honest with themselves about where this is. You know, we see so many reps over the years who will come into these deal reps and they say, oh, you know what, this deal's a whole lot further along than what it really is. And in reality, it's very much in the same position where this deal is right now, which is it's not really a deal at all, you know. But where I guess I would start with this is the rep has all the right things in mind in terms of the 3 next steps that need to be done. You're going into an unknown space, at least for, you know, the key accounts executive. They're not very familiar with the women's health market, but they do have relationships. And so a big shout out for the key accounts department, strategic accounts, health systems. That's what we're in. So, you know what? Lean on those folks. They've got great relationships. They've probably taken a long time to get there. So leverage that, tap into that value add within your company and begin to do the proper due diligence. Start to ask people through discovery what's important to them. You can't just assume that because the technology that they've got is old, that it's not providing them the necessary clinical needs, right? It may be just fine, and they may be able to get another couple of years out of it for all that you know. So go ask the questions, start making the relationships, and then start plugging them in with some other key opinion leaders that are using your technology right now so that you can educate them. This one, I did not think that I was going to be as excited to talk about, but again, you know, they're talking about our department. That's our people. So, you know, key accounts is where it's at.
I have a question, you know, for both of you. I think, so first of all, let's kind of get this out of the way real quick. So, because people have already, by the way, there's a lot of people who are new to the show. I appreciate the messages. Put it in the comments. Don't direct message me. That's the point of the comment section. So real quick, gentlemen, let's just do a quick vote. All right. So deal or no deal. 1, 2, 3. Oh, no, I'm joking. Yeah, no deal. So there's not a deal here. And again, the main thing is that, and let me bring everybody back for a second. The main reasoning for that is that you don't have enough information. But I think that the most important thing for this rep who's, you know, kind of taking this over is that in these transition periods, you know, it can be very chaotic. And I think when these things happen, a competitor is going to be all over the place trying to assess all these accounts. And to Sean's point, you only have so many resources, only so much time as a rep. And so the idea is to look for the weak link where you can get in and focus on 1, maybe 2 hospitals. And once you get a foothold and leverage there, it becomes a lot easier to spread to the others. Sean, would you agree with that?
Yeah, if you can build, you know, your clinical value early, right, and use that person and kind of coach them up, it's going to make your job easier. And with that many hospitals and that large of a decision, to Joe's point, it could be a very long process, you know, and where does that priority fall? So you're trying to find out, is there value? Where is that value? And is the target I'm actually going after the right target, right? You don't know that until you start to go out and build it. So a lot of different factors there. But instead of trying to go after all of them, really try to focus your attention because you're trying to get to a yes or a no as quick as possible.
Absolutely. Joseph, any final thoughts before we kind of move forward?
Yeah, I'm seeing some of the comments over here in your comments section, which I love, by the way. And I think people are right on in the way that they're looking at this. So not only do you want to focus in on that one or two targets, but in this scenario, they're putting a lot on a single person, which is a new chair. My gut tells me across, however many facilities you're gonna try to go target, there's a lot more people that could potentially be impacted by your technology, right? So get out there, start the clinical selling, like I see over here in the right-hand corner. And that's something you'll hear me come back to time and time again, is that, any and all of these deals begin and end with physician support, clinical support, the people that are actually going to be using it. So you've got to put yourself in the shoes of a hospital administrator and say, am I just going to buy technology for technology's sake? Or am I going to invest in something that could potentially impact my patients, be a program that we can go out and promote in the community and actually be something more than just a piece of technology? So I like the comments over there in the comments section. I think Sean's right on. And the reason he's on my team is because he's much smarter than me, better looking, and he's 9 times out of 10 has the answers.
Absolutely.
Nice compliment. I don't know if it's accurate though, but it's cool.
You're gonna make him blush. Hey, Sean, this is gonna be on video, so just
Perfect.
Yeah, perfect. Exactly. We'll bring up some of the comments. Of course, we love our audience. So Mehdi Tegru says, yeah, isolate the deal to one hospital at a time so the rep can focus with attention and detail to each hospital and meet their needs. Lisa Sullivan, big fan of her. Thanks for joining, Lisa. So Lisa Sullivan says, clinical selling while they are waiting on the changes. Find your innovative mobilizer. And then Kristen Shunk says, focus on the two to get to the big win, clinical selling with mobilizers. Use your key accounts to get to the C-suite. Gents, before we move on, and there's a few other questions, comments I want to bring up. Can you define for everybody, because this is a term that I'm not familiar with, which is the mobilizer?
You got me, Omar. I'll look to my boy Genius, who's on the team with me.
I'm not 100% sure on the terminology there.
I guess maybe it's the mobilizer, something like the key account executive to kind of like quarterback some things. So that's probably what it is. We got some more people. Man, we got a lot of people watching this. Very happy to see those numbers. We got Valerie Padawar on the treadmill. Valerie, please be careful. I can't stress enough. I get stressed out when I hear people on a treadmill or they're driving or something. Michelle Giacomo, an absolute sweetheart from Columbus, Ohio. Hey, Michelle, thanks for joining. Jared Massey from Cincinnati, Ohio, with the fire sign. Dude, it's definitely not fire sign in Ohio. It is freezing cold there. Come over to Cali, man. Anthony Ioni from Boston. I hope I didn't butcher your name, man. And we got a few more other comments. Let me just bring them up. Of course, the legendary Chad Device, otherwise known as the Mad Device Rep. Identify the sphere of influence around the top clinical decision makers as well. Who has the ability to help nudge us along at your leading account? I totally agree. Mad Device Rep, one thing that I'm big on is the psychology of persuasion, which is just because you have a clinician who's really interested, and Sean and Joseph, you tell me what you think about this. Just because you have a clinician who's interested doesn't mean that's the right person. You really have to understand what's their political capital, and do they have the ability to influence others?
Yeah, 100%. And one of the comments on there was saying, new chair is probably going to be a little cautious on decisions because, to your point, do they want to burn their political capital early? So I think that's a great comment about, getting to the chair eventually might make sense, but going to the chair early, it's a bit of a risk, right? Because if they're unsure or if they're unaware of what the value is and none of their colleagues are really asking for it, can you go back to that person again? So can I get a bunch of other supporters and or champions to go back to the chair? Might add more value.
Absolutely. I'm going to bring up a few other comments. Our audience is really active now, which is great. Few more comments, and we're going to move everybody to case number 2. Deal number 2. I'm going to say it's a tough one. It's a tough one, and we're going to be brutally honest about it. But let me bring up. Yes, sir.
One other thing that I noticed when you were putting the deal up for people to take a look at is this idea of market development, and so. I think all too often it's missed that people look to their peers, right? That's how technology gets adopted. And so if you've got somebody out there, it doesn't have to be in your territory, it can be from another territory that you can bring in to begin sort of softening the market for you, to talk about their experience with the products, maybe to do something like grand rounds. That could go a long way to potentially, promoting your product, but without you having to do it. Actually having somebody who's used it and who's influential in that society.
I absolutely agree, and I tell people all the time. I think salespeople get really excited because they want to pitch the product and demo it, etc. But I'll tell you, a physician promoting and talking about the benefits of your product on their worst day will do better than a salesperson on their best day. There's a reason why social proof is such a persuasive thing. Let me bring up a couple other comments. Michael Linsky says, for a new chair, that's a very high risk decision to change vendors. Build the army to make the change decision safe for the new chair. I totally agree. I think that's one thing that a lot of sales reps don't take into account, which is, how is this change in behavior going to be perceived by the peers, the bosses, and the employees of that decision maker, right? And so for a new chair, again, you have to put yourself in their position and think, what's that like for them? One thing I have to encourage a lot of reps to do is gather information. There's other people who have sold to these systems who are not competitive products. Talk to them. And this might sound crazy, but you got to pretend sometimes you're in like a Goodfellas mafia movie. Go find somebody, say, hey, I'll take you to lunch. Hey, I'll pay you. I will literally pay you a consulting fee out of my own pocket. Can I just sit down with you and let me ask you questions about how you got your technology into this hospital, what it's like? Talk to nurses, talk to other reps. Those are the people who know everything inside and out of the hospital. Sean and Joseph, any other tips before we kind of cover a few more comments, and then we'll jump to case number 2?
No, I would say, this is a tough one. It's going to take some time. Be patient with the process. Don't go right to the transaction. Build your support. Continue to build your relationships. And when the time's right, you can have those conversations about what the next steps are. Don't rush into, what does the process look like? Really build that army to some of those comments there and start building out, a chart of what that looks like from a few hospitals to a lot of hospitals, and it will make your life a lot easier.
Absolutely. Joseph, any last thoughts?
No, I would only say that in the future, having the person on, we got to get to that point, even if they're like behind a curtain or something, because that's where the real secret sauce is. We can start to zing a bunch of questions at them, and that's where it's going to be even better. Deal Rip 2.0, Omar.
Absolutely. Couple quick comments here. Anthony says, no worries, I'm butchering my name. Othman could never say it either. This is a great thank you for putting this on. Yeah, we appreciate it. Jessica Zamparetti, big fan of Jessica, says, yes, just literally did this today. Upside to nurturing an ecosystem of valuable partnerships that surround the surgeon. Totally agree. And Franco Datillo, utilize healthcare economics, reimbursement, and create positive patient outcome, positive reimbursement problems, a model used with the right audience. Fantastic. All right, let's get to deal number 2. And this is the one that I think we've been waiting for. And this is going to be real deal rip. This is going to be a real deal rip. I'll tell you that. Okay, let me bring it up. There, we're going to take a quick commercial break. Now, if you're in medical sales, you're going to want to listen to us, whether you're a capital sales rep, an associate sales rep, maybe you're a VP leading a sales team, or perhaps you're the CEO and founder of a company and you're doing your first sales hire. Let's face it, medical sales has changed quite a lot from just the past few years. But let me tell you how much it's changed, and more importantly, how bad it's gotten. There's a company called Access Monitor that did a survey of over 347,000 physicians over the period of about 8 or 9 years, right? And they started in 2008, and they wanted to see what percentage of physicians were accessible to reps. And the way they defined that is if a physician took 70% of the calls that a rep made, they were considered accessible. So if a physician gets 100 calls from different reps throughout the year, they take 70 of them, that's considered accessible. So in 2008, that number was 80%. And then in less than a decade, that number every year dropped little by little. And then over time, the compounding effects of that had a huge impact, because in 2016, that number dropped all the way down to 44%. Now, right now, we're in 2022 and about to start 2023. So fast forward 6-7 years, how much more lower is that number? And based on the variable of the 2020 lockdown, how much lower do you think it could have gotten? Now, based on my analysis and modeling of that, that number is less than 3% at this point. Think about that. Your sales team, every time they go outbound, they have a 3% chance of getting in touch with somebody, because only 3% of physicians are actually accessible to reps, right? So how do you differentiate? How do you actually put yourself to be in a position to be successful? Well, the good news is that you're listening to this commercial. And the best part is that the majority of companies out there, and when I say majority, I mean 99% of them, because I've audited so many of them, have not invested a penny into updating their sales training or having their sales reps know how do you actually sell and persuade somebody who you can't see in person, right? And I had this issue back in 2020, and let me tell you about the new way, the different way, right? And that is digital medical sales. You see, back in 2020, I was part of a small startup. We sold capital equipment to critical care departments. And I was able to use a digital medical sales strategy to put 35 deals in 60 days during 2020, during the lockdown. That's right, 35 deals. And those deals ranged from deals like Johns Hopkins, UCSF, University of Kansas, to HCA facilities, small regional hospitals, right? The idea is, how do you use digital channels such as LinkedIn, email, virtual demos to persuade at scale and drive technology adoption? And the best part is that you can do this as a team where the effects of it are even larger. And so I put together a program and a community to train and develop the sales team of the future called the Medical Sales Network Effects Program. Why network effects? Because the most powerful companies in the world, from Google to Facebook, Uber, and so on, have used the idea of a network effect, meaning that the larger a network gets, the more valuable it is, the more leveraged it is. And your sales team can use these same kind of principles in their outreach digitally so that they can sell at scale without stepping into a hospital. Let me tell you a little bit about the program and how it breaks down. The program is divided into 3 different areas. It's all centered around content, which is constantly evolving, being updated through our portal. Reps have access to this both on computer and on their mobile phone, so they can learn on the go. And we have events and a community around that. So the content is very simple. With the content, we take first principle foundational topics such as psychology, persuasion, network effects, and more, and help the rep apply it across a variety of different areas. Not only just their LinkedIn profile, but their emails, their presentations, their outreach. So that way, even when your rep has to go in person, they're a lot more effective because they know the principles of psychology and persuasion, and they're able to apply it. But then they can do that at scale using the same program. We have fantastic events every single week and every month. So every week we have these live calls where we cover a variety of topics, from how do you do a virtual demo, to how do you shoot a video sales letter, to how do you get emails opened. Did you ever think about that? Even before the before the lockdowns happened, we use email. How much email training have you gotten? Probably not much, right? So your reps could be sending all kinds of emails that marketing spent time to develop, and it's probably going to the spam inbox because they don't have it formatted a certain way, right? Or they didn't write the right subject line so that it actually gets attention, gets opened. Along with our events, we have this great thing called the Network Grand Rounds. These are essentially private Zoom calls with special guest speakers because, let's face it, as talented as I am, I don't know everything. There's a lot of things I don't know. So I bring on the best in the industry to give these private Zoom calls. And so everybody gets on, the speaker gives a topic, and then they can ask questions. And if they can't attend live, they can always submit questions ahead of time and then watch the recording. And we've covered topics such as customer success, territory management, capital sales process. Let me give you some examples of those talks we've had. We've had Dr. Ira Kirschbaum, the chair of orthopedic surgery at Bronx Care, the largest nonprofit in the country, give a talk on how to get technology into a hospital. Where else are you going to hear the chair of a department explain how to get capital equipment in? We have Dr. Sandra White, who teaches the business of medicine to private practice owners, explaining how a rep can be a partner and a contributor to a private practice. We also have reps and successful sales leaders give talks. So, for example, Jacob McLaughlin, when over at Medtronic, was given a poor-performing territory, turned it around in 1 year to a multi-million-dollar success story. He provides his framework for that. And, of course, our community. We have a growing community online. We have this private LinkedIn group where we use it for people to connect with each other and also to share content and reports. And we have a lot of great people in that group. We have influencers such as the Mad Device Rep, executive recruiter Mike Moore, other people such as former VPs like Jim Surik. But we also have a lot of sales reps, a lot of young associates who are in there who know how to commercialize and sell digitally, who you can hire onto your team, right? And also, there's plenty of people for you to learn from as well. We have some of the world's top and largest MedTech companies are in our program right now, people from Stryker and Medtronic and Johnson & Johnson, but also a lot of startups like Hyperfine, Potrero Medical, Intercosmos, Moon Surgical, and the list goes on. And of course, we have a growing list of members getting huge results. I mean, if you're watching this on YouTube or on Spotify, you can see all these results. You know, anywhere from people getting reached out to online from surgeons to going to conferences and being recognized. So, for example, Gaida Lovera, she's in the spine world. She mentioned how surgeons directly message her online to learn about her products, and she's actually recognized when she goes to conference. Franco Datillo, who at the time joined the program when he was in between jobs, was in a real tough spot, and wrote this beautiful testimony on how the program helped him land a new role and increase his income. And believe it or not, we actually have practicing surgeons in our program. That's right. There's actual surgeons. So like Dr. Michael Verdon, he's a practicing spine surgeon, joined the program because surgeons are wanting to learn how to utilize and leverage things like LinkedIn to control a narrative online. And he mentions how his network has exploded, right? And for this podcast, since you're listening to this, I have a free offer for you. You can get a free LinkedIn profile consult from me and my team and see if you've qualified for the program. Plus, we also have team packages. So go ahead and click the link in the show notes below. Book your free consult. The best part is that you're going to walk away with at least 3 ideas on how to improve your LinkedIn presence so you can sell more and more effectively. So go ahead and take advantage of this offer. And now let's get back to the show. Guys, I got to get some sponsors for this thing because, like, you know, I need a studio. I need some other people. I can't be doing this all by myself every time. Killing me here. All right. Deal number 2, disruptors everywhere. So this is the submission from the rep. My technology is now the latest and is no longer. I told you guys I was dyslexic, right? But again, you can't make fun of it because it's a hate crime. My technology is no longer the latest and the greatest anymore. Although my technology still has its time and place, I'm losing deals to new disruptive technology that doesn't make sense for the physician and hospital. By the way, just a comment, I think I need to rewrite some of these because now I'm realizing that a lot of these are copy paste jobs. So for the reps out there, I'm going to rewrite this stuff for you. All right. Just as a reminder, deal criteria. What are we looking for? Money, method, motivation, market development, internal support, and impending events. So let's rip right through this and see, does this deal have what it takes? On the money side, do you know if the item is budgeted or off budget? It is budgeted. Email from the appropriate administrator in December saying that the proposal was added to the capital list for fiscal year 2023. However, shortly after this email came out, the physician backtracked and told the administrator, got to hold off for now on moving forward with continued approvals. This is where the deal is right now. Not a good sign, but let's see, is there something there? Method. What is the approval process and how will they acquire? Department manager and administrator must plan for capital purchases in Q4, which is complete. His technology is $50,000 with competitor trade-ins. The competition has very creative rental and leasing options as well. The capital purchases are considered at monthly VAC committee meetings, approved by local C-suite executives, and then the PO is cut by the corporate hospital system within 30 days of the C-suite and VAC approvals. What about the motivation? What is motivating them to purchase? Current technology is 10 years old and now obsolete according to the department. The department was told by a competitor that they cannot service their systems anymore. This rep's technology accomplishes the same procedure in a more time-efficient manner than the current system. At the height of the physician's support in December, he told me he expected better outcomes with my technology due to the technical differences in how my technology operates. Here's the problem, though. As I mentioned, this rep has disruptors, very disruptive technology moving into the space. Problem, one approach that his technology only offers one approach. It's kind of cumbersome and does not need to be this difficult. The physician has actually told the rep jokingly many times, am I supposed to be working this hard? I'm working too hard, aren't I? The implications of that problem is that unsuccessful cases are there for a variety of reasons. The neat payoff of solving this problem is, of course, more successful cases, more time, more efficient cases, and his technology offers both the two or three approaches needed. Now, the relevant physician is a private practice with 2 block days for procedures, so time is of the essence for them. If he has more time-efficient technology, and even if the results are the same, he can do more procedures in the same allotted block time and still fulfill his daily rounding and office duties. On the market development side, who's supporting this project clinically and on the clinical side and the C-suite, and how has this been validated? Well, only one physician is performing cases, and he's been building, the rep has been building his support, the administrator support, and the department support for months, resulting in a discussion with the administrator. Last conversation with the physician was on January 10th. The rep has been unsuccessful in reaching him by phone and text. This was validated by December 13th or December 16th email from the administrator with the department manager and physician copied. The rep says, I have the administrator and department support, but they cannot move forward without the physician. We've heard that many times before, right? All right. Internal support. How have you educated and developed the market? How my technology will make the procedures easier for the procedure staff, the physician in multiple ways. The physician has validated this in front of me during other procedures, and I have supported this using our equipment. I have acknowledged our cost per case is very similar on the same procedure. The hospital will see the same reimbursement as the current system, but have an opportunity to do more cases if those cases are more time efficient with the technology. And we're getting close to the end here. We can have the discussion. Impending events. So what happens if they don't buy now? Well, lingering, and this is the big problem for the rep, lingering competition with various disruptive technology competitors is getting stronger by the day. I get very uneasy when the communication ceases, especially when at one point the physician and I were texting and calling on a weekly basis. It has now been 3 weeks since text responses or he picked up my call. Our fiscal year ends in April or sometime later this spring. The competitor trade-in program has not been guaranteed to be renewed in May, and the hospital purchasing group contract is around $120,000, which would lose leverage of the $50,000 trade-in credit. If the trade-in credit is unavailable in May, I feel that gives the physician another reason to go with the competitor. Finally, next 3 steps needed to close the deal. The rep's answer. Step number 1, regain and solidify physician support. The administrator needs to know he is 100% on board with my technology. It's been difficult to support cases in the last few weeks due to my large area and other deals I'm working. Step number 2, need to better understand the corporate system buying process. I've engaged my enterprise rep who has the health enterprise level contacts. She will engage when the time is appropriate. And then step number 3, need to better understand the local VAC processes with supply chain and other stakeholders. In my opinion, and as of today, number 1 outranks the other 2 by a wide margin. And again, number 1 is to regain and solidify physician support. So let's take that off and bring you guys all back on. Joseph, this time let's kind of start off with you. There's a lot here with this deal. What are your thoughts? What concerns you? What stands out to you?
Yeah, I almost wish we were in a room with this person where there was a bunch of that person's peers, because man, the questions would be coming at them left and right, and I think it would probably all stem from the same thing, which is what he highlights, and that is he's lost this deal. He's lost control of this deal, and the reason being is that his physician's been speaking to somebody else that has gotten in their ear and probably taken this in a much different direction. I would not be surprised if he lost the deal completely and they've already gone in the direction of another technology. When your communication begins to wane like that and you cease communication with the singular person who is pushing for that technology, there's something very wrong. And so you cannot rely upon email, text, even your cell phone. You've got to go there in person and get in front of that physician. And in this case, if I'm reading this right, he has the ability to go into the procedures using another technology of his. That's a perfect way to go back in there. You can't use the excuse that you're too busy if this is super important and you're trying to close it. I think that's it. That's the heart and soul of this entire story right here. And I hate to simplify it, but the deal's dead right now.
Yeah, I agree, and I have some thoughts on that. But Sean, what are your thoughts on it? What kind of tipped you off that may have caused some concern?
Similar to Joseph, when you're not getting the response, right, it becomes more challenging. And we're in a world where we have competitors that are always going after, our targeted physicians. And if there's no expectations that have been set on the front end of like what that communication is going to be and or what you're asking for them, when things like this happen, it gets harder and harder to go back to the well and say, this is kind of where we're at. So I would really try to understand and go back and really talk about what the interest was at the beginning and try to seek to understand more about, why were they interested in the first place? And is there an opportunity to speak to another peer that's using that particular piece of technology? Is there an opportunity to watch something? Is there an opportunity to continue to educate? And so not so much the rep going back and saying, and like, this is where it gets very difficult, right? You, in your mind, you're trying to keep in a level head of what you're trying to do and not talk about the competitors, but you have to talk about what is really important and find out what is important to that physician. What was really the end goal? His biggest thing he talked about was time, right? So you need to really hit home on that and talk about what this is going to do and share stories of other physicians that have potentially maybe saved time and really go back and build up that clinical support. And that will help. These other things that we're talking about, those are more transactional things. We're not there yet. We might have been there at one point, but we're not there anymore. So Go back to the basics, understand what the value is, try to create a timeline of what that is, and then really contract with that physician directly about what the expectations are moving forward. So you can really align with what the communication is going to be like. Hey, you probably got their cell phone number. I'm not going to text you every day, but when I do text you, it's going to be important. And this is what I'm going to do at the same time. So they really understand exactly what the next steps are and kind of where things are at. Because what can happen is when you have all these competitors coming in, they're doing the exact same thing that this rep's probably doing, right? So now it's like confusing and you start to mix up what technology is what. And so back to Joseph's point, that in-person communication, relationship building is number one. And until that happens, the other stuff is really, not important at this time.
I totally agree.
The other thing that I think is important to highlight here, and Sean's correct. Again, it goes back to clinical support is where everything should live in your mind, right? And if that dies off, then you don't have a deal, because ultimately they're the ones that the hospital is looking to, to use this after the fact. And so if you can't go back to their clinical anchors and say, hey, this is what I heard from you, this is what the technology provides, where have we gone wrong? If you can't do that and find the time for it, well, then you're kidding yourself. The other thing that I saw there was this idea about the prices going away. Worst impending event ever. Okay.
Why is that the worst impending event ever?
Because the way I see it is like this. If, for example, you've got kids and your car seat breaks, and somebody says, hey, I've got this really cheap car seat that I can sell to you. But hey, if you don't buy it right now, the price goes away. Or there's a much safer car seat and it costs more money right down the aisle. And it's going to cost me more money, but it's going to be safer. What do you think I'm going to go toward? I'm going to go toward the car seat that does more for my family. And in this case, maybe the competitive disruptive product is 4X, right? But maybe it delivers on clinical value propositions 4X or 10X. And so the value of the product or the price of the product cannot equate to the value of the product. Those are two very different things. And if I'm a hospital administrator, I look at that and say, fine, I don't care. Let it go away. My physician doesn't want to use it. So what does it matter if it's a trade-in price going away? If he's not going to use it, then it's money thrown away. So I think that this guy's or girl or woman, they've got to be really thoughtful about, is it something that they want more than the customer at this point? Or is this something that the customer really, really wants and feel is going to be better for their patients? And that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
I was going to make one other point, Omar, and you can kind of continue on. Think about.
Oh no, yeah. This is the meat of tonight's broadcast. So just lay it on. And again, but I just want to remind everybody, the purpose of what we're doing here is to help the rep, and a lot of this has to do with just brutal honesty, radical I'm not going to say radical candor, like just radical transparency about what we're dealing with here. Sean, please jump in.
No, I was going to say, sometimes, back in the rep world, you go in and you're at the office, there's 4 other vendors there maybe, right? And these guys are getting hounded constantly, not only on device, but in pharma and everything else. So
and by the way, I want to bring up a point real quick.
Sure.
Your point is very well taken. It's worse today than it was 5 or 10 years ago, because let's just say 5 or 10 years ago, what didn't really exist a whole lot of? SMB SaaS, small business software as a service vendors. And these salespeople are aggressive as hell, not just in person, obviously, but online, email, etc. So you're competing with, there's just more competition now. Sorry, Sean, continue. I just wanted to make that comment.
No, I was going to say, so just as you're trying to go through it, to Joseph's point, like, does the rep want it more than the physician wants it, right? And is that really where it's at? And when I was talking about you're there and there's lots of other, vendors there, and they're talking about a lot of different things. When you're going down this pathway, these guys, just like us, they get tired, and gals, and they get, deal fatigue that we talk about, where, they've gone to the well enough to ask for it and it's not happening. And now other people are coming to them with other things. And it's really going back to building that trust and alignment and focusing on what the next steps are, and really kind of contracting with that physician directly to see if you can solve that need for them that's going to make their life easier.
Our late and great mentor always used to say, and I think this is a common saying, which is like, time kills all deals. Do you feel like that's one of the big reasons that deal fatigue happens, is that if you don't prep the deal well enough at the beginning and get good momentum, it drags on and then people just lose interest?
No doubt. Not only do they lose interest, that budget that he's talking about is not solidified, right? There's 1 million products that are vying for that same budgetary dollars. So not only does it kill it from an enthusiastic perspective, but those budgetary dollars are being eaten up by more disruptive technology that's off budget and is eating into that. The other thing that I think that's super, super important here is that Um, and I'm trying to be really thoughtful about saying this, but you've got to find a point in time where you say, you know what, I'm going to cut bait and move on to something else. Like there becomes a point where you start to hound the physician, and that's no good for anybody involved, right? So as a rep, you've got to kind of have that ability to say, you know what, I lost. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with losing. Learn from your mistakes and then use those learnings and go win the next deal. But there's got to be a point in time where you say, I'm pivoting and I'm moving on because I don't have all the time in the world. It's a zero-sum game. And I've got to make my number this quarter, or I've got to, make my number for the year. And all too often it's like, man, I just have to have this. I put so much blood, sweat, and tears into it, when in reality, you should just pivot.
Mm-hmm. Do you think, the thing that I try and be empathetic about with reps is that, when you have a certain span of a territory, you're kind of limited. But what do you do in that event? Like, in the case of this rep, this deal, and I don't think, to be honest, let's assume that that even if they had a good relationship with the doctor, they did all the right things. Sometimes, no matter what you do, the market decides it's going to go a different route. What do you recommend this rep do in terms of when they report back to management about the deal? Like, what are their next steps? What do they do here? Don't all go at once.
A tough one. Yeah, I'm trying to think about this the best way to say it. I mean, it's one thing to blame. I'd say put blame on the market. It's another one to really take a look at how you looked at the situation, right? How many times do you go meet with a doc or a physician and they get so excited and you immediately run to the hospital, or you immediately run to the account because you think you've got it, right? When you really, Nick Offman made a great point here. Like, is there curiosity to value? Like, what is really the challenge here, and does my product help solve that? So that's one part of it. Understanding the market dynamics and what's happening, that's a whole other topic to kind of get into. But giving honest feedback about where the market's going and what you're hearing, I think, is super important. But taking a look internally to say, did I set this up the right way? Did I ask the right questions? And is this the right time, to Joseph's point, to continue on? Or do I need to walk away and focus my efforts on something else? Because I can't tell you how many times that is just been a time suck early on about spending so much time. And as reps, we often think if we're busy, we're being productive. And then if we're busy and we're doing a lot of these things, then it's going to show to upper management, hey, that we're busy and that this is going to be a productive use of our time, when in reality, right, if we're doing the same thing over and over again and not getting the result, it's insanity. So where is that time frame of understanding what I did originally? How do I help improve on it? And then how do I help communicate up so I can help the field and the market and my peers not make the same mistakes I did?
Yeah, and I'll make a comment on that, just as, from my standpoint, especially, when I moved more into marketing and helping to support the sales team, if you had a salesperson who had really bad judgment about deals, if you have somebody who's doing a good job in marketing, marketing is usually going to say, like, this guy or gal is costing us a lot of money and their judgment sucks. Like, these deals, every single one of them, they don't have the right criteria, et cetera. And I think, again, I have a bias about marketing-led sales organization, where marketing has to do a good job of putting a criteria for the rep. Because, again, when you're a rep, you're being judged on closed deals, right? Not activity, not anything else. And so giving the rep specific processes to follow, and helping them to analyze it. Because when you're in the middle of a big deal, for example, and I was in that situation a few years ago, and I needed somebody to pull me out of it with a huge academic center. And in reality, I didn't really have a deal. But when you're in that, you're emotionally tied to it, and you start coming up with your own biases, almost illusions, and hallucinating that there's something there when there's something, when in reality it isn't. Joseph, would you agree with that assessment? And what kind of tips would you give to get out of that kind of illusion?
Yeah, Omar, we talked about that on the podcast that we did together.
We did.
The importance of a process, and in this scenario, I would hopefully be able to go to my manager and say, "Hey, can we walk back through the process? Can you help me with understanding what my misses may have been, right? Did I not do the proper discovery on the front end to understand what those clinical anchor points were? Have I been focusing in on the wrong hospital all along, right? Is there another hospital that I should be calling on? One physician, you're putting a lot of eggs in one basket and hoping that you are just priced to perfection on the way that you go in there and get this deal done." And to Sean's point, there's a lot of big competitors out there that are trying to do the same things that you are. And in this case, probably with sexier technology, right? And easier financing terms and acquisition terms. So going back through that process and saying, "Hey, to your manager, to your director, whoever that may be hard on me. Let's look at the process. Where did I potentially go wrong?" And maybe you do something like this with them, right? Where you do a mini deal rip and you say, "Let's uncover all of the things that I could have done better. And if this deal is dead, then just tell me, Mr. or Mrs. Manager, Director, and I'll move on. If you think it still has legs, would you mind putting your eyes on it or bringing somebody else in to give a different perspective on where I may have gone wrong?" We talked about that on the podcast too, which is lean on your peers, ask others for advice. Don't think that you have to have a huge ego in this.
I totally agree, and I think that's a common theme that you see with salespeople, which is this thought of like, I got to do this all on my own. When you have an ego about things, your ego will blind you from the truth. And the other thing I would say, and again, Sean, I'm gonna use you as an example. I don't remember the deal, but I remember a long time ago we were in a deal rip, and there was a good deal you had that wasn't gonna go forward, but you were the one to point that out and explain it. And I remember management, I can't remember who I spoke to, but the point was that you did that on your own without management having to do that. And it was almost like you, when you're a sales leader, when you do that, you de-risk yourself, because if you don't have good judgment and objective analysis of a deal, you cannot be trusted, because you might forget about wasting company resources. You might waste a lot of time, right? And a company does not get that back.
Yeah, it's important to think about what are the expectations, and then to Joseph's point, can you kind of rip off the Band-Aid and look at the things you're working on, and are they the right things you need to be working on? Right? Should you look at it a different way? And
Absolutely.
Perspective from an outside source or a manager or a peer. I can't tell you how many times I relied on peers for thoughts on what I'm doing. Hey, this is where I'm at. I feel like I'm here, but can you kind of have a look at this, and am I missing anything?
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's that kind of being vulnerable a little bit to say, am I doing the right things, and am I spending on time on the things that matter? And that's probably the biggest challenge we have is where is that time factor built into this? And if we're not spending the right amount of time, can we adjust, regroup, and continue on?
Absolutely. There's some really good comments I want to bring up from the audience. So by far, the most popular comment, which has got like 6 or 7 likes on it, and people are saying all kinds of good things about it, is Eric Grahovic. Eric Grahovic says, "Proposal added in quotes to the list doesn't mean budgeted." Sean, Joseph, can you guys kind of sort of riff and comment on that real quick?
Yeah, it's what I talked about earlier. Even if it is budgeted, that really doesn't mean anything, because if an HVAC system goes down and they need to provide heating and air conditioning at the hospital, they're going to pull from that amount of money, right? And so again, you're talking about a zero-sum game in most cases with the budget. Now, they will buy off budget, right? But you've got to have a compelling case for that. But yeah, the list does not mean budgeted. I would agree with Eric. And I think that, again, what does it really matter if the physician's not backing it, and if they don't think that it's better for their patients and something else is? They'll find money off budget. If it's a better product and has a better value proposition, they'll find those dollars.
Absolutely. I got another one. So my audience, the audience knows me pretty well. So, but I'm, I do this because I love you guys. But Ben McClelland, man, much love to you. So, but we got to talk about this. Ben says the deal is on life support. It's not dead till it's dead. Ben, this is the issue though, is that you have to come to terms and look at some leading indicators that this is on a path to, no return. And I think that you're right. Like it's not dead till it's dead, but at some point, right, if you take it too far, you've wasted not only company resources, but your time. So this rep needs to start focusing on what deals outside of this system they can go after to put in their pipeline, right? And it could be that this is something that they come back to, but they can't continue to focus on this. Sean, your thoughts on this? Am I wrong in saying that? That's at least my take.
Yeah, I mean, back to the original point of, your time is your biggest asset here. So what are you spending time on? What does that look like? And to the point, it's on life support, yes, but what are you going to do to lift it up? Or to Joseph's point, is it time to walk away? You have to really kind of think about that from what you're going to do this quarter versus your pipeline as a whole. So there are a lot of different factors to kind of consider. But yeah, I mean, I've had situations where, it's at that point where, am I going to put all this time into it and like really try to bring it back? Or am I just going to focus on other things and have that conversation with my clinician that maybe this isn't the right time?
Absolutely. And Joseph,
Sean just said something that I think is so great, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all too often, I think we're scared to send the type of message that is, hey, I think I'm going to walk away from this. To the actual physician. I think I'm going to walk away from this. And that's a really difficult point to get to, but I guarantee you'd get an answer that way, right?
I agree. And I'll tell you, at least in my own program, I've been having to come up with a lot of tactics digitally, right? And so I've been learning a lot from like other industries, like the roofing and construction business, like salespeople from there. One of the things that I saw in the follow-up process is just very honest, like, hey, haven't heard from you from a while. You haven't, answered my text. Totally get it. Give me some feedback here. Where did I lose you? And that elicits a lot of honesty. The other thing I would say, and again, this deal was too far, forward to do this, but I think the follow-up process today in 2023 has to be a lot more dynamic, meaning that you have to start establishing that relationship with the physician early on versus every time you text, they know that, they're asking about the deal. I think this is where if the physician is actually on and active, let's say on LinkedIn, being more active on LinkedIn, at least for them to see, let's say you with other customers, product adoption happening, et cetera, you're able to stay front in mind for them. The other thing is on the follow-up, I encourage people to consider this combination of like education and entertainment, right? Which is every time you send an email, maybe you find something that's relevant to the physician's practice, maybe relevant to their interests clinically or from a technology standpoint. So that way you have a reason to message them or follow up with them, but it's not about, hey, just showing up, following up to see when we can meet again. Where's the deal at, right? So there's a way to kind of stay front of mind by providing value and not being, for lack of a better term, a pain in the ass. Joseph, your wonderful wife, Mrs. Othman, has a great point.
Hey, by the way, that's my brother.
Oh, that's your brother? Oh, I'm sorry. That goddamn dyslexia. Nicholas, I thought it was Nicole. I'm glad you corrected me.
I'll have to man. That the next time.
Was he texting you? He's like, bro, dude, you need to tell this guy I'm not your wife. Nicholas Othman, not Nicole Othman.
Yes.
And my apologies to Mrs. Othman, who's probably not going to let you back on the show, but
hey,
what can I do?
Yeah.
and Nicholas Othman, Joseph's brother, says it's important not to be emotionally attached to the deal. Totally agree. You can't be emotionally attached to it. And I think that, again, a lot of this is very much like dating. You have to be willing to walk away, and that's going to give you a little bit more power and leverage, because if not, like, I don't know about you, but you can smell neediness on somebody in a deal, in an interview, and I think, I don't know, I think there's a psychological trick to that where you can add, if you're able to add more to your pipeline, you have more deals going on, you're not putting all your eggs on one deal and then you're focused on it. What have you guys done in the past, like just to make sure you're not too emotionally attached to a deal?
Well, I'd say it starts with this, and I'll let Sean have the last word because he's probably going to say something a lot smarter than me.
I noticed you threw your glasses on, to try and kind of up it.
Exactly.
Like this panel about power.
I feel like what it comes down to is really who these products are all about. It's not about me. It's not about you. It's about better patient care. It's about, better efficiencies for the physician. It's about the hospital. And if it's all about where's the deal, where's the deal, where's the deal? Well, that's selfish, right? All you're concentrating on there is your pocketbook and making that end of quarter, quota, instead of saying, hey, you told me that you wanted to offer more patients better technology throughout the day. You told me that it's important to you. Bring it back to what's important to them and ultimately their patients, because that's the only reason any of us are in this industry. At the end of the day, it's because we believe in the technology helping patients. And if you lose sight of that, and if you become selfish, everybody's going to see right through that.
I totally agree. And Joseph, again, this is talked about on the podcast previously, which is this process of discovery. And I think, again, the one thing I have to tell to whether it's an associate rep or a capital rep, do the research, because look, you have this wealth of information online of how a physician thinks. They've posted things, they've written recommendations, and in your discovery process of talking to them, like write down exactly what the hell they say, because those are the persuasive sentences and language needed to make sure to trigger the memory of why they're changing a behavior or choosing to adopt a product. If you don't do that, you go off another route. Sean, comment a little bit on that, and then Ben McClellan has another great comment I'm going to bring up. We have a lot of comments. I can't get through everybody's comments, so if you have questions, comments, drop them in the box. Sean, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's I would say one of the challenges is you get a clinician excited and they're excited about your product, and that's what you run with, and then you go right to the hospital or to the surgery center, whatever that looks like, right? And oftentimes now, it takes multiple touches to continue that process, right? Because you're trying to get buy-in, but you're trying to continue that buy-in, right? And there might be multiple times that you need to kind of continue on to build that relationship and build that support, because like we talked about, there's competition out there. There's people trying to get after that physician directly. So it's little touches. It's understanding about what the value is to them. To Joseph's point, how is it going to impact patient care? And then the big part about it is the economic factor for the hospital. What's the driving force there? Does it make sense? And the biggest point, and I can tell you the amount of time I've wasted early on in my career is amazing. Do I have the right physician at the right hospital? Right? Because we have those physicians that we know that love our tech and love what we're doing, but they may not be the right fit at the hospital that we're trying to get it done at.
That's a great.
So
absolutely.
Is it the right fit? And that will really maximize your time as you start to look at what you're trying to do.
See, absolutely. That's why I keep Sean around.
Let me bring up a comment. So we have a bunch of comments. Let's work through this. We're at the top of the hour. We'll wrap up soon. I just want to make sure, Sean, Joseph, you guys are good.
We're good.
Yep.
Okay. So Ben McClellan. So Ben has a good comment, but Ben, I don't mean to pick on you, but I'm gonna explain why this is not a good idea right now. So Ben says, are there staff members close to the surgeon that may be able to share an update? Never hurts to make a new friend. You're absolutely right. Except all these activities need to be done at the very beginning of the deal. So again, in my opinion, and Sean, Joseph, I know this is my show, but this is your episode, so you jump in and disagree with me if you want. While you're starting to work a deal and learn these things, before you even talk to the clinician or hospital administrator, you needed to conduct some due diligence with the people who are on the staff, other reps, all these people, so you have some levers to pull when things are going astray. Then you say, okay, I can reach out to this person, that person. You doing that right now, it's just going to be desperate. And then again, it's going to be more time wasted, right? This thing, I don't know. This is like a dog that needs to be just taken out to the back and shot. So, you know what? I'm going to get canceled for that, but I don't care, right? It's after 5 o'clock. Sean, Joseph.
It's a nice segue. Yeah, I mean, the staff can be super important. I mean, the biggest push, I think the biggest clinical thing this physician said was time, right? So you can kind of pull on that thread a bit to the physician's team about time, right? How is that affecting him from hospital block time to clinic time? What does that look like? And really start to build that story, right? And I think all of those factors are going to be important. But to your point, the multiple touches of getting engagement, you can use the staff as well and be able to try to educate and empower them. Because what we're talking about here is trying to build that clinical support. And if the staff is excited about the product, it's going to resonate back with the doctor like, hey, we got to see this. We understand it. I think it would be this. There's somebody else in their ear talking about it when you're gone. So how do you create those,
good
right?
point.
Can you create
That's a good point.
You can potentially do that here if there's a way to create more value.
Absolutely. And real quick, one of our old coworkers, Sean Brian Duffy, has a nice point. He says it's not about what you think, it's about what you know. So you got to be objective.
I know where that one came from. Yeah.
I was gonna say I recognize those words. Of all these comments, that one stuck out. I'm like, oh, I know that. So let's take a quick vote. I think it's pretty obvious like where this is going, but for the sake of tradition that we just started, let's do a quick vote. So quick vote, deal or no deal on 3. 1, 2, 3. Sean, you look like you hesitated there a bit.
No, sorry. Camera.
So
I think it's fair to say that just because you get voted down, that doesn't mean that you can't go get it, right?
Yeah.
But you have to be honest with yourself. You do have to go back to your process. You do have to determine whether you've got a true clinical champion who is anchored in the value propositions of your technology. And hey, maybe the guy's been sick with COVID, right? Maybe something happened with his family. Maybe something else was responsible for the lack of communication. That could be the case. But take the time, go there in person, and finish this thing. And if it's not right, move on.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sean, Brian Duffy says Prentice. That is correct. Chris is definitely gonna come on the show in the near future, hopefully.
As soon as you said that, I could just imagine him saying that.
Oh, I heard his voice in my head. And I think, by the way, again, as much as I'm a big proponent of using, let's say, digital and social media to persuade, the reality is not every single physician is on, let's say, LinkedIn, for example, and not everyone that's on there is going to be that active. More and more of them are. And so my biggest thing is like, again, a lot of this is very much around scarcity. It's very much like dating. And so sometimes you have to start showing some attention and love to other people. And so if you're not getting the love from a deal, this is where I think using LinkedIn is very powerful as a capital rep even. So if you're as a capital rep, you go meet with another doctor, you have a great, let's say, demo, whatever, take a picture with them and say, hey, I want to post this on LinkedIn, share some things I learned. Maybe you're delivering something in the hospital. Share those things because those physicians, believe it or not, it'll pop up on their feed. And a lot of times that's what you need to do, which is how do you stay in front of the physician without doing it yourself? Meaning that you're shooting them a text, you're shooting them an email. The last thing you want a physician or hospital administrator to do is kind of roll their eyes and say, oh, it's this person again. It's like, and that's when you start getting ignored and you'll go straight to spam. Let's see here. I'm going to pull up a few comments, but we're kind of at the end of the show here. So it's kind of a free for all. So Sean, Joseph, maybe we kind of talk about some age old wisdom when it comes to, running these deals. Well, what's something that you think that most reps overlook in a deal? Like starting one, trying to close. And I'm gonna rephrase that real quick. I'm gonna back that up. Everybody's focused on closing deals. I think very few are focusing on starting the deals. I think that's an important part that's often overlooked. Can you guys talk about that in terms of finding and starting a deal?
Joseph, go ahead.
I was reading a book the other day I'll give a plug to it. I bought this for both of my guys. Discipline is Destiny, by Ryan Holiday, one of our favorites, Omar. And it talks about the tortoise and the hare and about going slow to go fast. And so what you'll hear from Sean and myself and others is this idea that you have to put in the preparation before you can execute. And, my sister-in-law is a really great attorney, and the amount of hours that she spends in discovery, in prep before those trials is oftentimes, 10x the amount of time she's actually spending in the courtroom. And so what I would suggest is on the very front end of your process, doing the proper due diligence, understanding what's important to that hospital. Have they made other big purchases lately? What are their competitors doing in the marketplace? What are they promoting on their website? Where did these, key physicians train? Do you know anyone else that trained with them? What kind of products are they using in those training facilities? So there's so many different things on the front end that I think are skipped. And then once you get in front of those folks, doing the proper amount of discovery so that when you're further down the road, you can come back and say, hey, these were all of your clinical anchors. And then the last point that I'll drive home is that peer-to-peer. Using that peer-to-peer network, using the ability to go and talk to someone or see a WebEx or see a demo where someone else is using it that they may respect, so that, the closing process is made very easy. And oh, by the way, the administrators are super happy with you on the back end because they just invested in something that someone is actually going to use, and they're going to use it appropriately.
I absolutely agree. I think Sean froze, he's jumping back in, but we'll wrap up in a few. Joseph, I'm just wondering, there is this, you guys mentioned the importance of finding the right doctor at the right hospital. And at least in my opinion, that doesn't always mean, oh, here we go. Sean's back. All right.
Hotel Wi-Fi is not great.
Sean, I was worried. I'm like, you know what? I knew at some point he just couldn't take it anymore. It's just like, I'm out of here. It's done with this. No, but Sean, I was bringing this up to Joseph about, you made a comment earlier about finding the right doctor at the hospital to move the deal forward. I really believe that it's not always who you think it is. A lot of people think it's like maybe the chair of the department or the attending. But if you find the doctor, let's just say you find a doctor who's very passionate about your technology, die hard, is like willing to fight for it. They don't got a lot of political capital in the hospital. Like what do you do with that? Like it's good to have that kind of a clinical champion, but they don't have the influence. Do you try and, well, I have some thoughts, but before I share them, like what do you do with that? Can you do anything with that?
It's tough. I think it's, can you use them as like influence within the market? Is he respected, or is she respected by the peers, right? Is there opportunity to kind of grow in that? Is there another, market that person might have connections with? Sometimes it's difficult to find the right person, but if you kind of understand what, where your product is, does it make sense inside the right hospital? You can sometimes try to use that interested physician to drive support outside of that one particular deal. So
that's a great point.
Yeah. It's interesting to kind of, I can tell you, back in our early days, right? In spine, you'd find people that were really excited, but maybe weren't the best fit.
Oh yeah.
So how did we help leverage what they were doing? Maybe they attended demos or those kinds of things to kind of help reinvigorate the physicians that are there, what this potentially could do. So there's a lot of different factors there, but I think it's trying to figure out what's going to matter to them. Is there?
Oh man, Sean froze.
Yeah, he
right when he's getting to good. Oh, now he's back. Sean, you're saying?
No, I'm good.
Joseph, can you guys like get Sean like a better computer, man? Like, come on.
Yeah, it's this Marriott
Wi-Fi. What Sean's talking about is something that he actually probably doesn't know what it is, because I don't think he was born yet. But you'll remember like back in the 90s, the mosh pits, right? And
Oh
so
yeah, 90s grunge.
the way you need to think about this is building a mosh pit of clinical support. And that goes back to the person who was talking about the staff, right? Absolutely. Get the staff on board. Go sell them. Go tell them how great this is going to make their life. Go talk to every single person in that hospital that will listen to you and get them bought into it. Because if you have 30 people from all different walks of life and all different aspects of running that hospital that are saying this is something we need to do to improve patient care versus one, that goes a lot further to expediting timelines and getting the deal done.
I know, absolutely. I know, absolutely. And going back, Sean, to what you were mentioning, like aside, from Joseph, like getting full support. And again, social proof and tribal approval exists for thousands of years for a reason, and so sometimes like getting the support of 3 or 4 nurses and staff members is enough momentum and more influential and persuasive than, say, one clinician. I think that leveraging the relationships you have are so important. So if you have a physician who's not the right one, maybe coaching them to say, hey, how do we get, who else in the hospital do you have a good relationship with? And I think also, and I've had to have these conversations at least many years ago with one physician in particular. And I have to be honest with them and say, hey, look, I just want to be very candid with you. This is not meant to be an insult. I remember saying it just like this is not meant to be an insult, but I want to be just honest with you. I know that you really believe in this technology, but we have to face it that right now by yourself, you're not going to be enough to get this deal through. And what I always tell them is like, am I wrong in what I just said? The guy was like, no, you're absolutely right. I said, okay, now that we're on the same page, who in the hospital do you have a good relationship with that can help you? Right. And when you work with a physician like that and you start, and I think, Joseph, I want you to kind of talk about this, the importance of a rep learning how to coach people in their deal versus, oh, you're excited about the deal. Great. And then they expect the physician to go and prioritize their deal over all these other things they're dealing with, including patient care, and then know what to do when they, let's say, get to the C-suite or talk to these people, which oftentimes they screw it up. How important is coaching from the rep side?
It's super important, but if all you are seen as is just a rep for that product and all you care about, again, is just that product, that's how you're going to be not only perceived, but dealt with within the hospital. So you've got to elevate yourself in the hearts and minds of the people that you're dealing with. You've got to be seen as somebody who is a consultant to them. You've got to be more than just the person who knows about the product. You've got to know about everything that surrounds that product, right? The market. You've got to know about the economics. You've got to know about all of the different value propositions. If you come at it from that approach and you've understood what's important to them, then you can give them solid feedback on how to go and make the next steps within the process. But if all you care about are just the bells and whistles of your product, and that's what you keep pushing, I can tell you they're going to look the other way and say, you know what, I got more important things to do. But if you can tell them, hey, here's how the hospital looks at it. Here's how the patients are going to look at it. Here's how you could market it once you're beginning to use it. Here's how it's going to make your life better. Those are all the things that I think they'll say, you know what, this person cares about more than just themselves. I'm willing to listen to this person, take the advice, and go use it to get the deal done.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sean, jump in, please.
No, I was going to say, like, it's, for me, for a big time, it was really practicing what I was going to say before I said it. What does that conversation look like? And, I have
how do you practice? I have
a bit of a monotone voice, if you can't tell. So inflection, talking about what excitement might be. There's a lot of things that sometimes are uncomfortable to do, but can you explain this piece of technology to your spouse, to your girlfriend, to your boyfriend in a way that makes sense so that when you're talking with a physician and you're talking about what it potentially might be, and when you're talking with that staff, it comes across natural. It doesn't come across like you're so worried about getting it done, right? And putting in that time is a really, really important asset that will benefit you in a lot of different ways, but practicing in the mirror, understanding what is going to happen will just pay dividends for you in whatever you're going to do.
I wholeheartedly agree. And then just kind of as we wrap up, I want to just quickly comment that I completely agree. And even with me, with my small business, I did over, I think, 150 sales calls last year. Every single one of those calls are recorded, and I watch them as it makes me want to throw up because I get sick and tired of watching myself. But I think that's the only way that you get better is trying, like if you do Zoom calls, record the Zoom calls, take notes, practice. I think too many salespeople try and just wing it because they think of the, salespeople in the movies, like, oh, I'm just going to do it this way. But the best always practice. And again, to kind of reference our late and great mentor, Chris Sells would always talk about how he would practice in front of the mirror. He would practice in front of Michelle, to the point where not only was he focused on the words he was using, but what is he doing? What is he doing with his hands? Who does he look at the room? When he ends the presentation, who does he stand in front of, right? All of these things, it's a performance, but it's persuasion, right? And I think that the more you focus on these little things, the better you are, because when the time comes, right, and you have that moment, a lot of times if you're not prepared, you didn't practice enough, the pressure will get to you. And that's where people screw up. And again, actually, I'll share one story. Sean knows exactly where this is going. So I'll share this story, and I got to tell you, we're an hour and a half in. And again, we're going to wrap up because I want to be gracious with your time. But we got a lot of people still watching this, so I really appreciate you all sticking around. So here's the story that I have of Sean. So when Sean and I started Missouri Robotics, we were doing a deal but we were doing role play, and Sean was doing a role play with Chris Sells, and Chris Sells told Sean, Sells was playing the part of the, I think of the administrator, and said, Sean, I think maybe we should just buy 3 robots. And Sean didn't break a sweat, was perfectly calm, and went on with the conversation, and it ended. And in the feedback, Chris Sells told Sean, you got way too excited when I said I was going to buy 3 or 4 robots. All of us in the room were, we kind of looked at each other like, what the hell is he talking about? Like, first of all, no offense, Sean, but you're not like Mr. Excitement. It was, like you were pretty just calm and everything. And Sells pointed out that while you had your legs crossed, and the moment that he said that, he saw that your foot kind of cocked up and lifted up, like it got your attention. And so small little details like that, I don't think an administrator would consciously pick that up, but subconsciously they will know that, oh, I got something on this guy, right? I think those are the moments that that compound over time and decide, do you get a deal or not?
Yeah. Little tells, yeah, of course.
Little tells. So, all right. So, gentlemen, look, thank you so much for your time. Look, as we were just in wrapping up, I'm going to give the floor to both of you. Let's start, I guess, with Joseph. Last words of advice for our audience and for those listening.
I would say develop a process if you don't have one. In both of these deals, they're trying to figure out what went wrong or what could go wrong, right? And so develop that process that you can use as a roadmap, and be honest with yourself about where you are in the process, where your gaps are, and in the process, lean on other people, get other people's feedback. Don't let your ego rule the day. And if you can do those things, you'll be successful, and you'll know when to hold them and when to fold them, as the late great Kenny, whatever his name was. I was gonna
Kenny Rogers. I don't know.
It's not Kenny Loggins. I'm late in the day.
Kenny Rogers.
Kenny Rogers did say that?
Yeah.
It's a song.
Okay.
Sean Stewart knows who I was talking about.
I'll tell you what, I mean, aside from the music, I do miss that guy's rotisserie chicken restaurants. Those Kenny Rogers roasters were great.
Kenny Rogers, correct. Kenny Rogers. I knew what I was trying to say.
I said it. I got you. No, I would say, preparation is everything, right? I kind of was ingrained on me early on. And to Joseph's point, like, what is your approach to your market, to your day? How are you evaluating that? And then are you asking for feedback, right? Are you asking the people around you? Are you asking your managers, what are you seeing? Could I be doing anything differently? Different approaches can be super beneficial. as you start to really build it out. And then something that I gotta throw my name out, name drop here. Ken Husted used to always tell me, just celebrate the little wins, right? Celebrate each week. You do something well, celebrate it, because next week is starting over again, right? And kind of building on it. So stay with it, stay prepared, and good things will happen.
Fantastic. Can't think of a better way to wrap up the show. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining. I'm going to take you off, hang out in the back studio for a moment. I'm going to come back there and we'll kind of chat. So as we wrap up the show, I just want to say thank you all for our fantastic audience. We appreciate it. And remember, for Deal Rip Live, if you want to submit your deal anonymously, go to dealrip.com. Submit it anonymously. If we are picked, we'll call you anonymously. We'll get your deal information, and you can get it ripped by great executives in this industry. Again, that's dealrip.com. We will be doing this again. We love the audience. I see those emojis flying up. It's like a freaking rainbow on my computer. I love it. Thank you so much. Have a great evening. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to another episode of The State of MedTech. I'm your host, Omar Khateeb. Do us a favor, if you like this episode, share with somebody, and go ahead on Apple and Spotify, wherever you are, leave a 5-star review, type a few nice notes about us. This is how we get other people to find the show. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.